Hey y'all, wait a second. Hey y'all, um, hey y'all, can you, oh, you can hear me okay. Oh, so, today I am going to be, so this is a fan fiction I'm working on, and in this stream I'm going to read out the, read the first 3 chapters of my fanfic out loud, and then I'm going to start working on the 4th chapter. So, it's called Scarface's Serenity, and it's a Scarface fanfic that takes place in an alternate universe where Tony Montana isn't a violent criminal. So, okay, let's get started. Chapter 1, The Escape. I can't believe that asshole framed us for murder, said Tony. I could never kill someone. I can't believe we're gonna be stuck here for the rest of our lives, said Manny. Suddenly, an idea struck Tony. Ayúdenme! Estoy enfermo! Yelled Tony at the top of his lungs. Tony, what are you doing? Whispered Manny. Before Tony could explain, 2 officers approached Tony. What's going on here? Said one officer. I think he's saying he needs medical help, said the other. Tony was taken to the medical wing of the refugee camp. As the medical staff attended to him, he eavesdropped on their conversations, hoping to gather any valuable information that could aid his escape. Tony strained his ears, hoping to catch any mention of escape routes or plans. He heard the medical staff discussing the layout of the refugee camp, mentioning a weak spot in the perimeter fence. They also mentioned that there would be a shift change in the security team that night, potentially creating a window of opportunity. Excited by this information, Tony started formulating a plan, carefully noting every detail. Tony, still pretending to be weak and in pain, continued to listen intently to the medical staff's conversations. He had gathered valuable information about the perimeter fence's weak spot and the security team's upcoming shift change. You know what? I don't think this guy is sick. I think he's faking. Get him out of here, said a doctor. But Tony didn't care. He had already heard crucial details for his escape plan to succeed. Afterward, Tony approached Manny and shared the information he had gathered. That's great, said Manny. Good luck with your escape. You're not coming? I don't know, man. What happens if we get caught? Said Manny. Don't you want freedom, Manny? After a moment of contemplation, Manny nodded and agreed to join forces with Tony. With their alliance formed, Tony and Manny began crafting a detailed plan. They considered every possible scenario, analyzing potential obstacles and devising solutions. First, we wait for the night shift change when the guards will be most distracted. Then we move towards the weak spot in the perimeter fence, said Tony. We must carefully time our escape to coincide with the moment the guards are on their break, to ensure we don't get caught. To further increase their chances of success, they gathered supplies and tools to aid them in their escape. Tony suggested that they search for discarded items or materials within the refugee camp that could be repurposed for their plan. Manny agreed, recognizing the importance of being resourceful and adaptable. As they finalized their escape plan, Tony and Manny knew that communication and coordination would be key. Manny, we can't say a word during this escape. Not even in Spanish, not even in Spanish. We're gonna need to be completely silent to avoid drawing attention. They devised a system of signals and codes to communicate silently during their escape attempt, minimizing the risk of being overheard. With their plan in place, Tony and Manny knew the time to execute it would come soon. They prepared mentally and emotionally, knowing that the road to freedom would be treacherous, but they were determined to endure and overcome. They kept their hope alive, ready to seize the opportunity when it presented itself. Under the cover of darkness, Tony and Manny put their meticulously crafted plan into action. The night arrived, bringing their anticipated shift change in the security team. As the guards gathered in the break room for their designated break, Tony and Manny knew it was their moment to make their move. Silently, they crept through the refugee camp, sticking to the shadows and avoiding any areas with active surveillance cameras. They moved with purpose and determination, their hearts pounding with excitement and anxiety. Reaching the weak spot in the perimeter fence, Tony and Manny carefully examined the area, ensuring it was still vulnerable as they had observed earlier. With swift and practiced movements, they began dismantling the fence, making sure to do so quietly to avoid drawing attention. As they worked, their hearts thudding in their chests seemed deafening. Every clang of metal or wire scrape felt like a loud alarm, but they remained focused, reminding themselves of the freedom awaiting them on the other side. Okay. Finally, with the fence sufficiently dismantled, Tony and Manny squeezed through the gap, their bodies brushing against the sharp edges. The adrenaline coursing through their veins drowned out pain or discomfort, fueling their determination to succeed. Once on the other side, they found themselves in unfamiliar territory, surrounded by darkness and uncertainty. But their plan didn't end at the fence. They had prepared for this moment. Tony took out a small compass he had acquired and consulted it, orienting himself towards a nearby road that would lead them away from the refugee camp. They moved swiftly and silently, their senses heightened as they navigated the unfamiliar terrain. Every rustle of leaves or distant sound made them pause, their breath held in anticipation of being discovered. But fortune seemed to be on their side as they avoided encounters with patrolling guards or stray security personnel. As they approached the road, Tony and Manny spotted a vehicle in the distance. With cautious hope, they approached it, realizing it was an abandoned truck. They exchanged knowing glances, realizing it could be their ticket to a faster and safer escape. Manny quickly checked the truck for any signs of keys, his heart racing with anticipation. They found a spare key tucked away under the driver's seat to their surprise and luck. They shared a brief moment of joy, feeling a surge of hope and relief. Without wasting any time, Tony and Manny hopped into the truck, starting the engine, and sped away from the refugee camp, leaving behind the confines of their former lives. The wind whipped against their faces as they drove into the night, heading towards a future filled with uncertainty but also the promise of freedom and a chance at a new beginning. Chapter 2: Road to Redemption. Tony and Manny drove through the night, the headlights of the stolen truck cutting through the darkness. The adrenaline rush of their successful escape gradually subsided, giving way to a mix of relief and uncertainty. They were free from the confines of the refugee camp, but their journey was far from over. As they traveled along the deserted road, Tony and Manny contemplated their next steps. They needed a plan, a destination where they could start anew. Tony felt compelled to seek a life far removed from the criminal underworld he had once known. He yearned for redemption, a chance to leave the shadows of his past behind in Cuba. Tony grew up in a disadvantaged neighborhood, surrounded by poverty and crime. Lacking proper guidance and opportunities, he fell into a life of petty theft at a young age. It started with stealing a loaf of bread, but his mama disapproved and made him return it. Tony's skills as a thief quickly earned him a reputation among local criminal circles, where he became known for his agility, resourcefulness, and ability to evade capture, until he and Manny were sentenced to 5 years in prison for stealing drugs. 2 years later, when Fidel Castro opened Muriel Harbor, Tony thought this would be a chance to finally leave his criminal history behind. But a Colombian drug dealer on the boat named Hector killed their friend Angel, and before they could even get a chance to be interviewed by an immigration officer, he framed Tony and Manny for the murder. Manny, we can't keep running forever, Tony said, breaking the silence. We need to find a place where we can build a new life away from all this chaos. Manny nodded, understanding the weight of Tony's words. You're right, Tony. We can't let our past define us. We have a chance to start fresh. All of a sudden, they heard a siren. Oh shit, it's the cops, said Tony. Tony stopped the truck. Don't say nothing, don't do nothing, whispered Tony. I need you two to step out of the truck, please, said the officer. Tony stared blankly at the officer. I need you two to step out of the truck, please, repeated the officer. Tony gave the officer a look of puzzlement. The officer walked away from the vehicle, pulled out a walkie-talkie, and started talking to another officer. You're really selling it, whispered Manny. After a few minutes, the officer put his walkie-talkie back in his holster and walked back to the truck. Do you understand English? Asked the officer. Tony was about to shake his head, but stopped himself. Tony wasn't going to fall for that trick. Is that a spider crawling up your shirt? Said the officer. Tony looked down. There was no spider. Tony sighed. Okay, you got me, said Tony. Tony and Manny stepped out of the truck. Why did you stop us? Asked Manny. Your truck matches the description of a vehicle that was reported stolen, said the officer. Tony's heart sank as the officer's words hung in the air. He glanced at Manny, a mix of panic and regret filling his eyes. They had thought they had escaped, but now it seemed that their choices had caught up with them once again. Tony quickly assessed the situation, his mind racing for a solution. He couldn't afford to get caught now, not when they were so close to freedom. He needed to think fast and come up with a plan to convince the officer that they were not the ones responsible for stealing the truck. Officer, there must be some mistake, Tony said, his voice filled with urgency. We just found this truck abandoned on the side of the road. We was actually planning to report it to the police. Manny nodded in agreement, playing along with Tony's improvised plan. Yeah, officer, we were just trying to do the right thing. We didn't know it was stolen. The officer scrutinized him, his expression skeptical. You expect me to believe that? How convenient that you just happened to stumble upon a stolen truck. Tony knew he had to make a convincing argument, something that would make the officer question his initial suspicions. He thought back to the information they had gathered about the refugee camp, and an idea sparked in his mind. Officer, please, I can prove we're innocent, Tony said, desperation evident in his voice. We recently escaped from a refugee camp, and we overheard the guards talking about the stolen truck that matches this one. They mentioned that the thieves was planning to abandon it on this road to throw the police off their trail. The officer's eyebrows furrowed, clearly intrigued by Tony's explanation. Are you trying to tell me that you're refugees escaped from a camp? Tony nodded, his eyes pleading for understanding. Yes, officer, we was wrongly accused of a crime we didn't commit. We managed to escape because we knew the truth would never come to light. The officer seemed to ponder Tony's words, mulling over the possibility that they were indeed innocent. After a moment of silence, he sighed and said, All right, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but if I find out you're lying, you'll be in serious trouble. Relief washed over Tony and Manny as the officer let them go. They quickly got back into the truck, their hearts still pounding from the close call. Tony knew they couldn't stay in the stolen truck for long, as it would only attract more attention. They needed to find a way to blend in and continue their journey undetected. Let's drive a few miles away from here and find a secluded spot to park the truck, Tony suggested, his voice filled with determination. We're gonna need to abandon it and find alternative transportation. Manny nodded in agreement, his trust in Tony's decision unwavering. They drove in silence, their eyes scanning the surroundings for a suitable hiding spot. After some time, they spotted a dense forest on the horizon, offering the perfect cover. Tony steered the truck off the road and into the forest, maneuvering carefully to avoid any obstacles. Once they were deep enough into the woods, Tony turned off the engine and they both climbed out of the truck. We can't risk being caught with the stolen vehicle, Tony said, his voice low. Let's gather our valuables and anything we might need, and then we're gonna set it on fire. Manny nodded, understanding the importance of leaving no evidence behind. They quickly emptied the truck, taking only the essentials and leaving behind any incriminating items. Tony then retrieved a small canister of gasoline from the truck's storage compartment and doused the vehicle, making sure to saturate it thoroughly. Manny struck a match and handed it to Tony, who tossed it onto the gasoline-soaked truck. Flames erupted instantly, engulfing the stolen vehicle in a roaring inferno. Tony and Manny watched as the fire consumed the evidence, their hearts heavy with the realization that they were truly leaving their past behind. "Now we need to find another means of transportation," Tony said, his gaze focused on the road ahead. "Let's head deeper into the forest and see if we can come across any trails or signs of civilization. Maybe we're gonna stumble upon a hidden path or someone who can help us." With renewed determination, Tony and Manny ventured into the unknown, their spirits bolstered by their narrow escape. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they also knew that they had the strength and resilience to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together they would forge a new path, leaving the shadows of their past behind and embracing the hope of a brighter future. Chapter 3: A Stranger's Kindness. As Tony and Manny ventured through the dense forest, their steps carefully treading over fallen leaves and tangled roots, Tony's mind wandered to a place far beyond the towering trees. The rhythmic sound of their footfalls seemed to sync with the imaginary crashing of waves, their path leading them toward the beach that remained elusive but ever present in Tony's mind. "Manny," Tony said, his voice carrying a touch of wistfulness, "you ever think about the beach? The way the sand feels beneath your feet, how the wave wash away your worries and make you feel refreshed?" "Don't forget the girls in bikini," said Manny. "It's more than just a destination for me. It represents a sense of freedom, a chance to start anew. I always dream of feeling the sun on my face, the sand between my toes, the ocean view," said Tony. Manny's gaze softened, understanding the significance the beach held for Tony. "We've been through so much, Tony. From the desperation of the refugee camp to the hardships we faced on the run, the beach feels like it would be a reward for our endurance. It's a place where we can finally let go, even if just for a little while." Tony's steps quickened, fueled by a newfound determination. "That's why, Manny, when we find a way to escape these forests, I want to make sure we reach that beach. It's not just a dream anymore, it's a symbol of our resilience and the hope that carries us through." Manny nodded, a sense of purpose gleaming in his eyes. "Agreed, Tony." With their shared conviction, Tony and Manny continued their journey through the forest, their minds and hearts set on reaching the beach. They knew that the path wouldn't be easy, but the vision of the sand and surf drove them forward, igniting a fire within their souls that couldn't be extinguished. Tony and Manny ventured deeper into the forest, their eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of civilization. As they walked, the dense foliage began to thin out, revealing a small clearing ahead. In the clearing, they spotted a worn-out wooden cabin, smoke billowing from its chimney. Curiosity piqued, Tony and Manny approached the cabin cautiously. They could hear a faint laughter and the sound of clinking glasses. Tony knocked gently on the cabin door, hoping to find someone who could offer them a ride to the beach. The door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with a warm smile on his face. "Well, hello there, young fellas. What brings you out here in the middle of nowhere?" Tony took a deep breath, deciding to be honest with the stranger. "We had a bit of an adventure, Senor. We escaped from a refugee camp and had to steal a truck. We had to abandon it in the forest, and now we're hoping to find a way to get to the beach." The man's eyes widened with surprise. My, you boys have been through quite a lot. Come on in, have a seat. I'll make us some tea, and we can talk about this." Grateful for the unexpected kindness, Tony and Manny entered the cabin, their weary bodies sinking into the comfortable chairs. The man named Henry busied himself in the small kitchen, preparing tea and a plate of freshly baked cookies. As Tony and Manny waited, they explored Henry's cabin. "Manny, look at the birdie," said Tony, noticing a parrot in a cage. Henry chuckled from the kitchen. "Isn't she beautiful?" he said. "What do you call her?" asked Tony. "Her name is Lulu," replied Henry. Tony got a cracker from the kitchen and showed it to Lulu. "Lulu want cracker?" asked Tony. Lulu squawked. "Lulu want cracker?" repeated Tony. Lulu squawked again. "Lulu want cracker?" Tony asked the third time. Tony, what are you doing? Give her the cracker, said Manny. This how you teach birds to talk, said Tony. Tony, you can barely speak English yourself, said Manny. Tony grinned at Manny's witty remark. I had 3 birds in my house when I was a kid, and I teach them all to talk, Tony said, holding the cracker closer to Lulu's cage. Watch and learn, amigo. With a confident swagger, Tony began repeating the phrase, Lulu want cracker, in a sing-song manner. He enunciated each word clearly, emphasizing the question with a playful tone. Lulu, intrigued by the repetition, cocked her head and observed Tony with her beady eyes. Manny watched skeptically, his arms crossed over his chest. I still don't see how these will work, he muttered. But to Manny's surprise, as Tony continued to repeat the phrase, Lulu's squawks began to change. The parrot's initial squawks transformed into something resembling the phrase Tony had been saying. It was as if Lulu was attempting to mimic his words. Lulu want cracker? The parrot squawked, each word distinct and recognizable. Both Tony and Manny froze, their jaws dropping in astonishment. Did she just say it? Manny stammered, disbelief etched on his face. Tony's eyes sparkled with triumph. She did. I told you, Manny, I have a way with birds. Unable to contain their excitement, they burst into laughter and applause, causing Lulu to flutter her wings excitedly within her cage. Henry joined in the jubilation, clapping his hands together. Well, I'll be damned, Henry exclaimed as he walked out of the kitchen with the tea and cookies. I've had Lulu for years, and she's never spoken a word until now. You two have some secret talent. As they sipped on their tea, Tony explained their situation in more detail, emphasizing their desire to reach the beach. We've been dreaming of feeling the sand between our toes and the salty breeze on our faces. It would be a moment of solace after all we've been through. Henry listened attentively, his eyes filled with empathy. After a moment of silence, he spoke. You know, I used to have a van that I used for my fishing trips. It's been sitting in the garage, gathering dust. If you promise to take good care of it, I'm willing to lend it to you. It's not much, but it'll get you to the beach. Tony and Manny exchanged grateful glances, their hearts filled with gratitude for Henry's generosity. Thank you so much, Senor. We promise to take good care of it, Tony replied, his words laced with sincerity. Henry smiled, his eyes twinkling with kindness. That's settled then. The van is parked out back. Take the keys and head on your way. Just be sure to return it once you reach your destination. Overwhelmed by I agree. Good point. Someone just said something in the chat. I'm replying to their her comment. Okay, that used for my fishing. It's been sitting in the garage gathering dust. If you promise to take good care of it, I'm willing to lend it to you. It's not much, but it'll get you to the beach. Tony and Manny exchanged grateful glances, their hearts filled with gratitude for Henry's generosity. Thank you so much, Senor. We promise to take good care of it, Tony replied. Take good care of it, Tony replied, his words laced with sincerity. Henry smiled, his eyes twinkling with kindness. That settled. Then the van is parked out back. Take the keys and head on your way. Just be sure to return it once you reach your destination. Overwhelmed by Henry's generosity, Tony and Manny thanked him profusely, their gratitude pouring out in their words. With the van's keys in hand, they bid Henry farewell and they stepped back into the outside world. The van, though old and weathered, was a welcome sight. Tony and Manny hopped inside, the engine roaring to life with a turn of the key. They pulled out the clearing, leaving behind the cabin and Henry's kindness. As they drove towards the beach, a renewed sense of hope filled their hearts. The van carried them closer to the destination they had dreamed of, their spirits lifted by the generosity of a stranger. They knew that their journey was far from over, but with each passing mile they grew more determined to seize their freedom and embrace the beauty that awaited them ashore. Okay, so that's what I've got so far, and now I'm working on chapter 4. So yeah, this is what I've got of chapter 4 so far. It's only like, yeah, There's only like a few paragraphs right now, but I'm planning to get this chapter like finished by the end of the month. That's what I've been doing, like trying to post one chapter every month. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it so far. Let me know what you think in the chat in the comments below. Mm, see you later. You saw my first. No. We were watching my birthday. Hey, you were watching my live.
Yes, I watched live and I commented and I shared. Very nice. So that's what you were preparing all this time. That's why you were not picking up my phone. But if you could spend your time on these activities, because you know these are not money.
Yeah, yeah.
This is like your fun time, but you could actually do it when you're in Yale, where you can get all the attention from all the people in school and professors and good feedback too.
Yeah.
Showered. Today she showered. Did a lot of paratha, showered her, did like 4 hours, 3 hours meditation too. They didn't have much to do. And I think I'm stuff done. Try to get this stuff. Did you what did you finish your shit?
Not yet.
Please do though.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and she has a Twitter and
Okay.
and anywhere you think, you can.
Okay.
Twitter, Instagram.
Zillow? What about Zillow?